I know, I am 99.9% sure this is not going to change in Japan. I mean, America is a place where you have the effects of diaspora, whether you like it or not. I think it got interesting when I started to meet Korean Japanese people because I realized they were really interesting. And instead of focusing on the law or the issues or the idea of trying to correct history, which was sort of like my intent, it was a stupid intent because if you're a storyteller, you should focus on telling the story. I wasn't focusing on telling the story, I was focusing on being correct. And being correct is a terrible reason to start writing a book. I mean, especially a novel.
We also we talked earlier, you started writing this when you were 19. I won't say your age out loud because
I'm 50. I'm going to be 50 in November. It's
there
okay.
You go. There's quite a big difference in that time. The difference between your 19-year-old self and your 50-year-old self in discussing this book and celebrating this book and understanding where you are in your career is a huge difference. What has it been like to see all that work and all that time in your own life kind of coming to this more wise place?
Oh, it's very kind of you. I think that the biggest shift has been from me to being a very angry person about an issue, whereas right now I feel mostly amused and grateful about so many things. And even if things are really upsetting, I keep thinking that it's contextually important to remember how it works in history. And I think that's been really helpful. The other thing that I find really helpful is to consider, again, how lucky I am to get to talk about this book and this issue. Because this issue, I know, I am 99.9% sure this is not going to change in Japan. However, I think that people should be more interested in this subject because it applies to all of us today about diaspora. I mean, America is a place where you have the effects of diaspora, whether you like it or not. People came to America because they didn't fit in England. People went to Australia because they didn't fit in to England again. So I want to understand what happens with imperialism and also the impacts of post-colonial world, and that's really where we live right now.
We're in the middle of this, great experiment, this big changing country. We have no idea where we're going to end up, but this idea that it's constantly evolving and that you're documenting this moment, this sort of evolution, how has your own life changed since you came here as a young person at age 7 from South Korea to today? What have you seen in some of the changes?
I can't believe that people like me are even on this show. And I don't mean that in any kind of criticism, but people like me did not. They're not on television. I mean, the absolute erasure and deletion of Asian Americans and Asians in Western media is shocking. I mean, if you look at the percentages of how they are represented in television and film, and also in books, like right now what we're having is a kind of a small flowering. I don't know how long it's going to go. Really, I mean, if you look at it historically speaking.
You think it can be pulled back again?
Well, people might say it's not a good time. Like we're seeing a kind of response. Like I think most people in media are very progressive, incredibly progressive. However, they tend to see race as a binary of black and white. But I think the Latino voices, the Asian American voices are completely neglected. And I think that whenever I think about that, I think, okay, I'm really humbled by this moment. So what can we do and how can we change? But if you just look at the statistics, it's really quite alarming. So
there is a flowering, as you mentioned, though. We have Aro Kwan coming onto the set later, who has written a lot about sort of some of the Asian writers, some of the Asian American writers that influenced her. You're one of them. But you see now so many amazing books that are hitting and that are reaching beyond a certain demographic. They're reaching the people who love great story and who want to learn more about other cultures and who are just interested because you know how to weave a tale for them.
Oh, thank
so
you.
When you think about sort of that idea of driving empathy through books, don't you see it still going that far? I mean, I know you just mentioned to me a second ago that you thought maybe they'll get tired of it. It seems like it's exploding at the moment, yeah.
I hope it's exploding, but I do think that there's also a segment of the population that feels very threatened because they feel like they're losing their spot. So I'm mindful of that. In the same way, in the history of America, we have moments when we have the rise of right-wingers or people who really want to shut things down. So I'm aware of it. I will say this other thing that I forgot to answer in a prior question, which sort of relates to this. When I was 19, I didn't think that what I had to say mattered. And at age almost 50, I feel like what I have to say, if it matters, I must say it. And I did not feel this way. And I think that the confidence that happens in this country, if you are a person of color, that's been permitted. And that's quite something. Whereas in other countries, that's not so.
Well, I'm glad you feel compelled to say it, because Pachinko is a result of that. And the fact that you have this relentless perfectionism, a National Book Award finalist, Pachinko, a really wonderful book. I'm so excited for everything happening to you.
Oh,
Thank you for joining us